It started with a key. Not just any key, but one wrapped in an old handkerchief, tucked inside a safety deposit box I'd almost forgotten. I found it 6 months after my grandfather passed, inside a small branch bank just outside Portland. I was the only one listed on the access form. My name, Claire Ellison, scrawled in his sharp, familiar handwriting. That morning, I held the key in my hand for a long time. I didn't realize then that it would unlock more than just an office door. It would unravel the script my family had spent years perfecting. I arrived at the Lakeshore Grand Hotel on a foggy Thursday in mid-October, the kind of fog that clings to your skin and makes everything feel slightly out of place. The hotel stood just a block from the Oregon coast, all white columns and blue-trimmed windows, looking more like an old-money estate than a modern retreat center. This was our family's annual gathering, something my mother liked to call an intentional bonding weekend. To me, it always felt more like a passive-aggressive showcase of who had achieved the most since last year. Promotions, new condos, better wine choices. Everything was a scorecard. But this year, I wasn't here to compete. I was here to observe. No one knew that I was now the sole legal owner of the Lakeshore Grand. Not my sister Elise, the golden child turned brand strategist with her face on every third billboard in San Francisco. Not my mother, Diane, who once told me, "Some people are background characters in their own family, Claire. Learn to accept it." Not even my father, who'd quietly receded behind a second marriage and a retirement plan that didn't include me. I had been invisible for so long that stepping into the hotel felt more like slipping into costume. The front lobby gleamed as usual, scented candles, soft piano music, staff trained to smile with just enough warmth. I stood there for a beat, watching my family gather near the welcome table. Elise was in the middle of it all, laughing like a woman who'd never known discomfort. I approached the front desk alone. "Claire Ellison," I said. The assistant manager, Leo, recognized me immediately. He gave a subtle nod. "Everything is ready, Miss Ellison. Would you prefer your suite upstairs?" I shook my head. "No. Give me whatever room my family assigned. I want everything to stay exactly as planned." Leo blinked but complied. "Room 103, he said after a moment, "downstairs, near the staff laundry." "Perfect," I said. I meant it. If I wanted to see how far they'd go to pretend I didn't matter, I had to live in the space they thought I deserved. That night, dinner was held in the newly renovated conservatory, a glass-paneled space overlooking the garden. A long banquet table stretched across the floor, white linen and glimmering cutlery. Elise was already seated next to our mother, wearing a soft blush dress like she was ready for a magazine cover. The only empty seat? Tucked behind a potted fern, barely visible from the head of the table. I sat there in silence. No one acknowledged me until the first course was served. "Claire, you're still doing that little design thing?" Uncle Ryan asked, swirling his Pinot Noir. "Yes," I replied. "It's a creative agency now, Bluewood Studio." Elise laughed gently. "Aren't those kinds of jobs basically automated now? I read an article." "AI's taken over that space." She turned to our cousin Avery. "Didn't your firm cut the whole graphics team?" I stayed quiet, sipping my water. What they didn't know, what none of them bothered to ask, was that Bluewood had tripled its client base in 2 years and just landed a global campaign. But I wasn't here to win points. I was here to listen. And the more I listened, the more I realized how easily dismissal becomes routine. It wasn't cruelty, it was convenience. Just as dessert arrived, a soft-spoken man in a crisp chef's coat approached. "Miss Ellison," he said gently, "was the arugula risotto prepared to your liking?" Elise turned sharply. "Wait, you know the chef?" "We've collaborated before," I said, briefly. That alone shifted the air. I wasn't supposed to have professional connections, not real ones. Certainly not ones that implied respect. The moment passed quickly, but something in Elise's expression faltered. I saw the flicker, uncertainty, maybe even doubt. That night I returned to room 103 and sat on the thin twin mattress staring at the wall. I didn't feel angry. Not anymore. What I felt was clarity. I understood now that every time they placed me near the laundry or behind the curtain, it wasn't an accident. It was a message. And messages, once decoded, lose their power. I reached for my bag, pulled out the folder I'd been carrying since Portland, and opened it to the page titled Legacy Transfer Agreement. My grandfather hadn't left me a key. He'd left me a map. And tomorrow, I would follow it. By sunrise, I was already dressed and walking through the quiet corridors of the Lakeshore Grand. The hallways still smelled faintly of lemon oil and lavender, just like they did when I was a teenager wandering these same halls while the adults toasted vintage wine upstairs. Back then, I used to sit outside the conference room door, doodling logos in the margins of napkins while waiting for my grandfather to finish board meetings. No one noticed I was there, and that invisibility had strangely become my armor. Today, though, I had no intention of hiding. I headed to the third floor, where my grandfather's office used to be, a private suite no one in the family had entered since he passed. The gold lettering on the dark oak door had faded slightly. G. E. Ellison, Executive Office. I unlocked it with the key from the handkerchief and stepped into the room that had once been his sanctuary. It was untouched. The same velvet chairs, the same marble paperweight on the desk, even the old framed photo of him and me at the county fair, long before the weight of legacy made love conditional. I stood still for a moment, letting the silence wrap around me. Then I walked over to the desk and opened the side drawer. Just like he told me in his last letter, there was a wooden box with a latch. Inside were decades of records, handwritten notes, copies of emails, correspondence with lawyers, a few yellowed newspaper clippings about the hotel's earliest years. But one folder stood out. Labeled simply, Claire, to be opened when it's time. I opened it slowly. Inside was a signed letter of ownership transfer, dated 7 months before his death, along with a notarized amendment to the hotel's trust naming me the sole steward of the Ellison Foundation and its assets. No co-owners, no oversight committee, just me. Below the documents was a handwritten note. Claire, you see people as people, not as tools. That's why this place needs you more than it needs another MBA. I sat there for a long moment, trying to absorb the enormity of what he had entrusted to me. This wasn't just a hotel. It was a statement, a correction, a defiance against the family tradition of rewarding performance over presence. But my thoughts were interrupted by a knock on the door. Elise's voice drifted in. Claire, are you in there? I closed the box quickly and walked to the door, cracking it open. Just getting some air, I said. She looked suspicious. This area's restricted. I tried to come in yesterday and the concierge said only staff or management are allowed. I shrugged. Maybe they got mixed up. I was just passing through. Her eyes narrowed. You always had a way of slipping into places you didn't belong. Or maybe I've always belonged and no one noticed, I said evenly. Elise didn't reply. She glanced behind me into the room, then turned and walked off. I waited until she disappeared down the stairs, then locked the door again. The documents needed to stay hidden just a little longer, not out of fear, but because the truth, once shown too early, could be twisted. I wanted them to see me before they saw the paperwork. That evening was the Ellison Achievement Dinner, a title Elise herself had coined 3 years earlier when she won the first engraved trophy our mother commissioned. Every year, a family member was awarded for making exceptional contributions to the Ellison name. This year's dinner was held in the rooftop atrium, lit by golden chandeliers and flanked with white roses. I arrived 5 minutes early and took the seat that had, of course, been placed at the far end. Elise stood at the front, rehearsing her speech under her breath. My mother hovered nearby, adjusting centerpieces and directing servers like she ran the hotel herself. As the dinner began, the usual accolades flowed. Elise was named recipient of the award again, to no one's surprise. Applause echoed. Toasts followed. I clapped, smiling politely, waiting. Then, halfway through dessert, I stood. "I have something to say," I said calmly. The room went still. My mother blinked. Elise froze mid-sip. I pulled a folded document from my bag and laid it gently on the table. "This is the ownership transfer for the Lakeshore Grand Hotel, signed and notarized by grandfather himself. Effective 6 months ago, I became the legal owner." No one spoke. Elise gave a sharp laugh. "What kind of fantasy is this?" I looked her in the eye. "It's not a fantasy. It's a legacy. One that grandfather entrusted to me because I didn't ask for it." My mother's voice finally rose. "Claire, why would he choose you? You've never even—" "Fit the mold," I finished. "I know. That's why I never expected it, but he saw me. All those years you all dismissed me as the quiet one, the lost one. He was the only one who didn't need me to be someone else." My voice didn't waver. I wasn't there to punish anyone. I just needed the truth to be acknowledged. Elise stepped forward, her tone suddenly different. "Claire, why didn't you say anything sooner?" "Because if I had," I said softly, "you would have spent all your time trying to prove I didn't deserve it. I needed you to see who I was before knowing what I had." Silence returned. This time, it didn't feel heavy, it felt necessary. I sat back down, leaving the folder on the table. The next morning, I walked into the fourth-floor lounge before the others arrived. Morning light spilled across the seafoam-colored walls, catching on the glass frames that displayed vintage postcards of the hotel. This room used to feel like a museum, cold and performative. But today, it felt like a clean slate. On the table in front of me were 6 folders. Each one contained a proposal for the Ellison Renewal Project, a joint initiative that would reinvest part of the hotel's profits into local education, small business mentorships, and a hospitality training program for at-risk youth. I hadn't come here to take over. I came to rebuild something that mattered, and if they wanted to be part of it, they could. But I wasn't going to beg for their belief. One by one they arrived. My father entered first, looking older than I remembered, as if the years of silence had finally caught up with him. He gave me a slight nod, tentative but genuine. Then came Aunt Carol and Uncle Ryan, followed by Elise, noticeably subdued. My mother entered last, a thick notebook clutched to her chest. She didn't speak, but she looked me in the eyes, which was more than I'd expect. I waited until they were seated before I began. "Thank you for coming. This isn't a lecture and it's not about control. It's about the future of something bigger than all of us, if we want it." I passed out the folders, one by one. I've been reviewing grandfather's notes. He didn't just want this hotel to survive. He wanted it to matter. And I think it still can. Elise flipped open the folder in front of her. "The Ellison Renewal Project," she read aloud. "You're launching a foundation?" I nodded. "Funded with 5% of annual profits. But this isn't just about writing checks. It's about legacy through purpose." My father leaned forward, scanning the proposal. "You're setting up community scholarships and a culinary training program?" "Taught by Chef Moreno," I added. "He's already agreed to lead it." My mother looked at the packet without speaking. "What role would the family have in this?" Uncle Ryan asked. "Advisory, at first," I said. "Eventually a rotating council, but no one gets a permanent seat. This isn't about status, it's about responsibility. Those who contribute in real ways will help steer the mission." There was no applause, no enthusiastic cheers, just quiet contemplation. But for once, it wasn't defensive, silence. It was reflective, and that was a start. Elise closed her folder. "If you need help with messaging, I can assist," she said carefully. "Not for credit, just because I believe this matters." "Thank you," I said softly. "That means something." My mother finally cleared her throat. "I want to help with the art therapy program. I I think I need it as much as anyone. I didn't respond with a hug or grand words. I simply nodded. Some healing starts in silence, and that was enough for now. Over the next several months, the Lakeshore Grand began to transform, not just physically, but in spirit. Room 103 was converted into the Ellison Archive Room, where guests could view decades of letters, photos, and stories about the hotel's history. A once-ignored space now became a symbol of preservation. The Scholarship Fund began accepting applications. In our first year, we sponsored 12 local students to attend community college, including a young woman named Reina, whose mother once cleaned rooms at the Grand. Chef Moreno's culinary trainees catered their first event 2 months later, a community brunch that filled the courtyard with laughter, food, and music. Elise, true to her word, helped us build a brand identity that felt both modern and rooted. She designed a new logo, a single open door with sunlight streaming through. Because it's not about who walks in, she told me, it's about what they find when they do. My mother began teaching weekly calligraphy workshops in the art room. She stopped calling me the artsy one and instead started referring to me as the one who brought us back together. My father joined the mentorship circle for aspiring local entrepreneurs, sharing his experience with failures as much as his triumphs. One day, after a session, he told me, "I used to think legacy meant assets. Now I think it means impact." Robert never returned, and honestly, that was for the best. Not every door needs to remain open. Some exits are necessary so better things can grow. What mattered was that the people who stayed had started to see one another not as rivals, but as collaborators. Even Elise and I, who once couldn't get through a dinner without passive jabs, now found ourselves working side by side. We didn't pretend the past never happened. We just stopped letting it control our present. On the 1-year anniversary of the Foundation's launch, we held a gathering in the rooftop atrium, the same room where Elise once accepted her 3rd trophy, now echoed with the stories of students, artists, and community leaders. Reina stood at the mic that night and said something I'll never forget. "I never thought I'd be seen here, not like this, but someone opened a door, and now I see myself differently." As applause filled the space, I stood at the back, watching, not needing to be at the front anymore, not needing recognition, just content to know that the legacy was alive. And sometimes, that's the quiet triumph no one can take from you.